This is a true story. Dramatizations are derived from eyewitness testimony and second-hand accounts. Afghanistan, 2001, and the Taliban are on a rampage.
We heard 1 or 2 explosions, obviously grenades.
Hundreds of fighters are trying to shoot their way out of a makeshift prison. TV reporters are trapped in the crossfire.
There was bodies everywhere.
Attempts to end the bloody battle go disastrously wrong.
You can hear American voices shouting, you know, man down, man down, man down.
The situation has just turned critical.
Turn the cameras off. Turn the cameras off. Have no right, no authority.
The day after 9/11, President Bush speaks to the world.
The deliberate and deadly attacks were more than acts of terror. They were acts of war.
The war on terror soon roars into life in Afghanistan. Within 10 weeks, the Taliban regime is paying a heavy price for its support of Osama bin Laden. Taliban fighters made up of Afghans, foreign jihadists, and Al-Qaeda are pounded by high-tech weaponry. Local Afghan forces, called the Northern Alliance, are a key US ally. This is their chance to seize back their own country. By November, the northern town of Kunduz is one of the last Taliban strongholds. As it falls, there are rich pickings for all. Northern Alliance warlords squabble over territory. The CIA hunt for Al-Qaeda terrorists among the fighters. Journalists from all over the world have a front row seat.
So in the end, the Northern Alliance were able to take Kunduz with a minimum of opposition.
Arnim Stout is a reporter covering the war for German national television.
It seemed at that time that we were just witnessing the very last moments of a war.
The next day, 137 kilometers to the west, hundreds of Taliban fighters gather on a dusty desert road. Exhausted by the relentless fighting, they have decided to negotiate a truce with the Northern Alliance. Arnim Stout is acting on a tip-off.
We had got the information through an Afghan contact that very morning, and we went there early to see what would happen.
General Abdul Rashid Dostum, the key commander in the Northern Alliance, takes charge of the negotiations. Dostum makes the Taliban leaders an offer. If they give up their weapons, he will allow the Afghan nationals to return to their homes. The foreign fighters will be handed over to Dostum himself. He has his own plans for them. The Taliban leaders agree, but don't tell their own men what is going on. Dostum's men disarm the fighters and release the Afghans as promised. Then the foreigners are told to climb into a fleet of trucks. Confused about what's going on, they do as they're asked, but try to hide grenades and guns in their clothing.
They were not very thoroughly searched.
Dostum orders that the foreigners be taken to his personal headquarters, a nearby fortress called Kali Jangi, or House of War. Kali Jangi is a 19th century castle, 3/4 of a kilometer round. It has massive walls, 20 meters thick and 30 meters high. Inside, there are 2 enclosed compounds, separated by a dividing wall. To the north is Dostum's strategic headquarters. In the southern side, his armory. The main entrance to the fort is on the eastern side. By twilight, the convoy containing around 300 Taliban fighters arrives. They are worried. Inside the fortress, they are at the mercy of the Northern Alliance. They complain to TV journalists.
Whenever we come here, we feel as like prisoners.
The Northern Alliance soldiers unload the fighters and start to find the concealed weapons. The mood on both sides is turning ugly.
Can you tell us why did you decide to surrender?
Why I'm not surrender?
50 meters away, anger ripples through the jihadists' ranks. One of the fighters takes matters into his own hands. He takes the last action of his life and pulls the pin on a grenade. The blast is captured on camera. The fighter kills one of Dostum's senior commanders, as well as himself. The Northern Alliance are furious. The Taliban are taken to a pink-colored building in the southern compound. Beneath it is a basement. Dostum's men cram all the fighters into the space and lock them in for the night. With barely any food, water, and no sanitation, conditions are dire. In the darkness, the quiet is shattered by a grenade explosion. Another prisoner has taken his own life. For the remaining fighters, the carnage at the House of War is just beginning. The next morning, 2 Americans, Dave Tyson and Mike Spann, arrive at the fort. Spann is 32, from Alabama, and has 3 children. He left home so fast, he didn't get to see his parents.
He says, "Dad, I'm on the way to the airfield." I said, "We're leaving now." He said, "Well, have you got time to stop and wait somewhere that I can see you?" He said, "No, they're waiting on me." He said, "I gotta go."
The 2 men are CIA agents, and they have one aim: to track down members of Al-Qaeda and find Osama bin Laden. This is the moment they've been waiting for. The agency has been secretly meeting with General Dostum for months. In return for US support, the Northern Alliance warlord has agreed to give the Americans access to any foreign Taliban he captures. The deal in the desert was a double cross. But the Taliban are not going down without a fight. Tyson and Spann start questioning the men, who they think might be Al-Qaeda.
All these militaries, I think you come here to Afghanistan to kill people.
At 11 a.m., German journalist Arnim Stout arrives at the fort, hoping to speak with some of the prisoners. He is keen to get the Taliban side of the story.
It seemed to me a good opportunity for in-depth interviews and somehow give a face and a voice to the demonized Taliban enemy.
In the courtyard, Tyson and Spann are becoming frustrated. The cameras are still running. After questioning several prisoners, they're gaining little useful intelligence. Then, they spot a pale-skinned captive.
Speak English.
Perhaps he could reveal critical information about Al-Qaeda.
You know the people that you're here working with are terrorists? They killed other Muslims. There were several hundred Muslims killed in bombing.
The prisoner doesn't utter a word.